Independent films. Not everybody loves them. A lot of people expect big budget effects and production and acting in every film they see. Then there are horror fans. I think we appreciate independent films a little bit more because we know that's where horror takes chances. That's where the horror superstars of tomorrow get their first shot. This week, we have a nice handful of independent horror films, so let's get right to it. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. Bad Ben 4, The Mandela Effect, is available streaming on Tubi and from the Bad Ben website. It was directed, written, and starring Nigel Bach. Tom Riley, writer-director Nigel Bach, seems to be caught in a time loop where he relives the first day he acquires the house on Steelmanville Road from an estate sale. His repeated attempts to understand the paranormal happenings at the home end in disaster, yet he continues to find himself in his car on a long road with the house as his final destination. While I felt the last Bad Ben installment, Bad Ben 3, Badder Ben, was a rough watch, Bad Ben 4, The Mandela Effect, is a sort of return to form for this popular low-budget film franchise. Paring the extensive backstory and lore down to the basics, Bach succeeds where things got convoluted in the last film. The story plays out almost in a Groundhog's Day manner where Bach's character, Tom Riley, experiences his demise over and over, facing different terrifying aspects of the haunted house each time. While the effects are at a minimum, Bach successfully achieves quite a few sequences of tension and sheer terror. I have to admit, I jumped quite a few times during this one. There's one sequence where Riley encounters a creepy doll in the attic that is extremely well realized. Another involving phone calls that are coming from inside the house also succeeded in giving me the genuine creeps. There's even a jump scare that works better than most of what Blumhouse has churned out lately. While done on an extremely low budget, I couldn't help but be invested in Riley's fate, even though I knew he would just start the story again if he met his demise. As usual, Bach is not a good actor. He delivers lines flatly and walks around a lot in his underwear, reminding you of that neighbor who has given up on life and mows his lawn in black socks and flip-flops. Still, with 4 movies under his belt, I'm really getting to like this guy. It's wonderful to see Bach learning from mistakes made in previous films and improving on his skill at inciting suspense and scares. This series keeps on plugging on, and I can't wait to encounter the Crescent Moon Clown, who makes his debut quite scarily in this film, in next week's 5th installment. Exorcist Vengeance is new on demand and digital download from Uncork'd Entertainment. It's directed by Scott Jeffrey and Rebecca Matthews, and written by Matthew B.C. and Jeff Miller. Exorcist Vengeance opens with hard-edged priest, Father Joseph, played by Robert Bronzi, tracking down a sinner and blowing off his knees with a giant revolver before he is carted away by the cops. Sometime later, Bishop Canello, played by the big bad from Rambo, First Blood Part 2, and Beverly Hills Cop, Stephen Burkoff, calls upon Joseph to perform an exorcism because he's the best there is at exorcising. I guess. This brings Joseph to a household plagued by a demon who has taken residence in one of the family members. While some of the family doubt Joseph's mad holy skills, he soon proves to them that he is the only hope for the family's survival against this dark and evil force. Robert Bronzi bears a fair resemblance to Charles Bronson and has been milking that for all it's worth for the last few years in lo-fi horror and action films such as Death Kiss, Cry Havoc, and Escape from Death Block 13. While Bronson actually had a lot of acting chops, he often simply relied on being stoic, letting his cold demeanor say 1,000 words. His career was long with many levels, but his most famous were the Death Wish movies, which relied on the amount of firepower and not the power of his acting chops. Bronzy is able to ape that stoic and cold-faced killer style to a T, as long as he's not saying anything. If you squint, it's almost like Bronson is still alive and kicking ass for the Lord in Exorcist Vengeance. The thing is, I've experienced much worse Exorcist ripoffs than Exorcist Vengeance, and found Bronzy brandishing firearms against the devil to be quite entertaining. It's lo-fi, for sure, but the film actually sports a talented cast that are able to blanket the rough acting coming from Bronzy. It was pretty awesome to see that Steven Berkoff is still alive and still quite menacing as the bishop, even though his character isn't really meant to play that way. And while actors making up the family aren't big names, they convey the amount of emotion and drama necessary, specifically Sarah Alexandra Marks, whose Rebecca is the only member of the family who believes in Bronzy. The acting definitely elevates an otherwise cliched possession plot. Expect the usual Christ compellings and women tied to bedposts here. It's fun to see Bronzy backslapping the possessed with a Bible as if it were a bag of coins. The effects are decent, and there does seem to be some money put into the lighting and camera work. This isn't a great film at all, but if you're looking for that lost film where Charles Bronson plays an exorcist and saves a family from the devil, this film where Robert Bronzy plays an exorcist and saves a family from the devil is a worthy substitute. Rose, A Love Story, is new on-demand and digital download from Shout Factory. It's directed by Jennifer Sheridan and written by Matt Stokoe. Rose, played by the very Hermione-looking Sophie Rundle, is sick, and her husband Sam, played by Matt Stokoe, wants to keep her comfortable and safe in their secluded cabin in the forest. While it's not clearly stated, Rose shows all signs of being a vampire, as she can't take bright light and turns into a drooling monster at the sight of blood. When a stranger named Amber, played by Olive Gray, shows up to their home, it threatens the fragile life they have built for themselves. There's a lot to like about this tender and tragic little vampire story. Rundle and Stokoe are actually a couple in real life, and it's apparent as there really is some great charisma between these two. I really like some of the quiet scenes where they deal with the way each feel like they are a burden to one another. These intimate moments are the foundation of the film, and it's a strong one. It is subtitled A Love Story, after all. The effects are subtle, but work. Rose's eyes go white, and she gets kind of veiny and all hissy. This being a very small and intimate film, the effects match the scope of it all. The action is downplayed as well. There are a few moments of great tension as I found myself invested in this couple, and these sequences where Rose's monstrosity endangers that. The problem is that I think too much time is spent highlighting this relationship and the dilemma this couple endures. A few dangers to this fragile ecosystem the couple has set up arise, but the real threat doesn't really appear until well after the hour mark. It reminds me of the structure of a much better vampire film, My Heart Doesn't Beat Unless You Tell It to. But in that film, I felt there was more story to tell than there was in Rose. With Rose, it feels the interest was in illustrating the relationship and the lengths Sam will go to protect his love, and the conflict comes in much, much later. The ending is powerful indeed, but there's an awful long wait for action for those who are looking for a little scares and blood in their vampire movie. Like many recent films, it feels like the film ends right when the action was about to start. I get it, this is a low budgeter, but still, films made with much less have been able to tell a fuller tale. Rose is well acted and has a real likability to it, but it left me unsatisfied from the storytelling level, specifically with the long lead up to a very short conclusion with no hint at how the story really ends. King Knight is new in select theaters, on demand, and digital download from XYZ Films. It's directed and written by Richard Bates Jr. Selling bird baths online and living a Wiccan lifestyle with his life partner Willow, played by Westworld's Angela Sarafin, Thorne, played by Criminal Minds' Matthew Gray Gubler, is content with his life as a Wiccan cult leader. But when he receives a message from his secret past, their peaceful life is tossed into chaos. Richard Bates Jr. is awarded a lot of leeway in my book. His first film, Excision, was one of the best and mind-searing horror films I've ever seen. It's a film I often recommend to anyone looking for fresh and different horror, even though it was released way back in 2012. Since then, his track record has been hit and miss, with suburban gothic and tone deaf not really working for me, but Trashfire delivering the right amount of twisted and weird moments that made Excision such a masterpiece. With King Knight, Bates steps further away from his horror beginnings. King Knight is not a horror movie at all. It centers on the Wiccan culture, which is often mistakenly associated with evil, but in fact simply celebrates solstices and beliefs around earth spirits and rituals. In many ways, King Knight reminded me of a modern take on the Addams Family or the Munsters, as it is about a dark family who shivers when facing what society has deemed normal. Even lead Angela Sarafian bears a striking resemblance to Morticia Addams. The horror in King Knight is what Thorne and his cult experience when facing normal. At its heart, this is a coming-of-age comedy where Thorne is given a challenge to face his past. I won't reveal this past, but I will say that it's a funny scenario. The comedy comes from Goobler and his fellow cultists frolicking in the fields and taking part in goofy Wiccan rituals with a straight face. Not being a Wiccan myself, I wasn't offended at the way Wiccan culture is portrayed here, but maybe if you take the culture seriously, you might get your feelings hurt. But Bates finds the humor by making fun of people taking things too seriously, which is funny no matter the religion or belief system you follow. It's the acknowledgement that these people are doing these things with a straight and earnest face that makes it all work so well. I wouldn't say King Knight is a laugh a minute. I chuckled quite a bit. Goobler is a fine comedic actor and leads the film well. It's obvious that this is a very low-budget film, so instead of large, shocking moments, King Knight relies on strong comedic charm and character moments. A lot was put into the look of Thorne, who is adorned with tattoos, wears black and various jewelry, and has a blank stare of quiet contentment in the face of everything. The script helps with this, as Goobler's fast line delivery makes you register the jokes a beat after he says them. I was surprised by Goobler's deliveries more than once. I really love the aforementioned Morticia Addams-esque performance by Angela Sarafian. Her reaction to accepted society is quite funny, especially when it hits so close to home. Her deep-set eyes are so overwhelmingly sad and beautiful that even if you don't recognize the name, you'll remember this actress for her role as one of the sex bots in Westworld. Here she shows some great comedic timing that I had never seen before in this actress. The rest of the cast all exhibit their eccentricities well, with some great comedic moments. It's also cool to see the obligatory Ray Wise appearance, and Barbara Crampton makes a cameo and always shines. Another Bates standby, Anna Lynn McCord, pops up for a bit of voice acting, as does Aubrey Plaza, which only add to the weirdness of Thorne's road to discovery. My focus in this review has been on the performances. This is mainly because I wasn't blown away by the film and story, but found these performances to be endearing and amusing enough despite of them. Bates is a bizarre director who focuses on strange and dark relationships contrasted against the mundane world. It worked in Excision and Trashfire best and bloodiest. While King Knight is a step further away from horror, it still has whiffs of that genre while telling what boils down to a sitcom plot device. This is a mild recommendation. Those expecting the extremity of Excision will be disappointed, but there is a quirky sadness to the relationship between Thorne, Willow, and their cult that is undeniably watchable. Alone with You is new on demand and digital download from Dark Star Pictures. It's directed and written by Emily Bennett and Justin Brooks. Charlene, played by Emily Bennett, arrives at her apartment and waits for her girlfriend Simone, played by Emma Miles, to arrive after her work trip. She cleans the house, showers, and gets ready for a romantic evening, but the longer Charlene waits, the stranger things get. Charlene is now trapped in her apartment with no idea how or why. Alone with You feels like a single-location stage play. Besides a few shots along a dreary beach, the bulk of it plays out in Charlene's apartment. This doesn't make for the most action-packed of stories, but the emotional heft and sense of mystery is prevalent throughout. Alone with You is going to be predictable for many as it plays out like some very familiar Twilight Zone episodes. But what makes it watchable is the outstanding performance by its lead, Emily Bennett, and the strange happenings going on around her. Bennett has a ghost-like demeanor. She wears every emotion on her sleeve and is far from a perfect person. She's evidenced through flashbacks and her few interactions with friends, her mom, played by Barbara Crampton via Skype, the authorities she calls when things start getting weird, and the stranger from next door she interacts with through the vents of her apartment. Despite being somewhat of an ugly person personality-wise, as she is presented as distrusting, clingy, and occasionally downright pathetic, Bennett still maintains enough humanity to allow one to feel for her. This is a testament to her acting that she's able to win investment despite her character's faults. I like the increasingly odd things occurring in and around Charlene's apartment. The voice from next door is creepy as all get out, as oftentimes all it does is mimic Charlene's pleas for help. The darkness surrounding the windows is another unique and unsettling touch. Alone with You also incorporates shapes and forms in the background that will keep you scanning the periphery of the screen to notice everything and uncover the mystery. In the end, Alone with You wrapped up exactly the way I thought it would. It was quite obvious what was going on in the story, especially if you watched any kind of horror anthology, short story, or Twilight Zone segment before. Stretching this concept out to full feature length might have been a mistake, as I feel things do get redundant and the impact of the revelation would have hit harder had there been less time used. Still, this is a short feature-length film with a lot of great and chilling elements. Bennett is the focus for the entire time and commands the story with her emotional roller coaster well. Alone with You is not the most original of films, but the emotional story it does tell hits deep, and the imagery is bound to cause a shiver or two.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality.